And they also realize that they've got to live with Iran. And if the U.S. doesn't, close the deal on this, if the U.S. just walks away and leaves them holding the bag, that's not good for them either.
President Trump has vowed to hit Iran very hard. Here he is speaking in the Oval Office this evening.
I've been briefed. It's a little more of the same, but it's going to be straightening out. It's going to be straightening out. In the meantime, we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming. They're asking us not to do it, but they tried shooting it last night. So we had 5 rockets shot going 8,500 miles an hour, and all 5 rockets were knocked down to the ground. But they nevertheless took a shot, so it's our turn. And we'll see if we get there with an agreement at some point, but we're going to hit them very hard.
Well, his promise of retribution comes after the US military say they intercepted a surprise attack by Iran on its forces. Trump is reported to have told Fox News, "We're going to beat the effing S-something T out of them." Trump also told the gathered reporters he wants Congress to add tariffs on Iran to the Russian sanctions legislation, which is was being pushed by the former Senator Lindsey Graham before his recent death. Well, with me to discuss this ever-developing story in the Middle East, let's speak to Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO. Hello, Jim.
Well, hello. How are you?
Very well. Delighted to have you with us. Look, President Trump is using some pretty strong language for his latest threats against Iran. What do you make of this? Do you think there's a sign of frustration from the president here?
Well, I definitely see the frustration, and it's been quite commented on. And just in what you read, as far as what he was saying, the effing essing, he usually is not using those words in public all the time, and so that shows a degree of where he is in terms of his frustration. And also that's echoed in the U.S. tactics. He's talking about hitting them harder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Iranians asking him not to do it, which I doubt. They're asking him. They've been able to absorb blows. So he's definitely frustrated, and he definitely feels a bit caught.
Yeah, because we had, I think it was 14 straight days of some pretty heavy US attacks on Iranian targets. That was then suspended while there was supposed to be room for negotiations. But you then had the Iranians launching an attack on American bases, and we're into another round of tit-for-tat attacks.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's frustrating for all of us. We would all like to see this thing winding down here. And this tit for tat with no end in sight is getting frustrating for all of us. But I think the Iranians are showing that they're not ones to bend. And I think that's what really frustrates the president, is that he's not used to people, A, standing up to him, and B, not relenting after he's pummeled them. And these Iranians are showing that they're not going to bend. And not only that, they're going to go on the offensive. So they're going to attack U.S. forces and tankers and this type of thing. And that just spirals things up again.
It's interesting that we've had in the last day or so Saudi Arabian forces joining U.S. attacks. And clearly Iran had hoped perhaps that by launching attacks against some of those Gulf nations that we would be cowed into supporting Iran. But if anything, it seems to have hardened the hostility to Iran amongst its neighbours.
Well, I think that's right. I think there's a lot of concerns being raised in the Gulf capitals. They're not only are they hardening against Iran and warning Iran, but they seem to be in other ways distancing themselves a bit from the United States. And they also realize that they've got to live with Iran. And if the U.S. doesn't, close the deal on this, if the U.S. just walks away and leaves them holding the bag, that's not good for them either. So they're really they're trying to be very thoughtful, I guess you could say, very careful about how they're going to respond. Because at the one end, you got the United States saying you better support us, the Iranians on the other end hitting them with missiles and saying, don't get so close to the United States, we're still here and you're dependent on the Straits. And so, like for Saudi Arabia, it's put them in this position where, on the one hand, they're going to be supporting the U.S. by hitting those Iranian militia in Iraq, of all places. They joined in that fight, and that was to show the Iranians, don't push us. And that includes getting the Houthis involved. The Houthis are saying, well, we're going to begin to blockade Saudi Arabia, and we're going to join in this fight. So I think in this case, Saudi felt they had to jump into this. But at the same time, they don't want to go in with full both feet because they're not sure where the U.S. is going and how this will all end.
Yeah, and clearly President Trump wants to get that Strait of Hormuz reopened. But Iran has learned, hasn't it? And we've talked about this before, just the power that it has, however badly depleted its military is by the US attacks on its military. Iran still seems able to carry out random attacks on tankers, and that is sufficient to close up that Strait of Hormuz.
Well, that's exactly right. It just takes one drone or one missile, one tanker gets hit, and all the others shy away. And so they're able to do that with depleted military capability, depleted arsenals. They're able to have that kind of effect, and that goes back to Trump's frustration. He has been told by his Pentagon that they have decimated the Iranian capability. And yet every night there's some new outrage, including these missiles that you just reported on, going against a U.S. base in Jordan. And so it's frustrating for him. And it's also showing that really one of the options that is still on the table that he might choose to do is a very major military excursion into Iran to seize the Strait. That's something that's been kicked around, that he's being told he needs to finish the job, but that would call for troops on the ground. It would be a tremendous military operation that I hope we don't see. He's got to get back to the negotiating table and try to extract ourselves the best way we can.
And you talk about that possibility, but I mean the risk if he walks away is that Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. We've had the prospects raised, haven't we, about a multinational force, the US indicating that it wants the UK to get involved in some force to help to police the Strait of Hormuz. But Britain's making it very clear that it's not going to start doing that until there is peace in the area, and we are such a long way from that. And as you mentioned, the Houthis now threatening to block another key waterway in the region. Do you sense that others around President Trump in the administration, Pete Hegseth, the War Secretary, and of course Marco Rubio, who's at the State Department, what sort of sense do you get of whether they are behind President Trump in the somewhat erratic approach to all of this?
Well, they have demonstrated that they are behind the president. There has not been a whisper that has reached the public ear by either Hegseth or by Rubio. There hasn't been a whisper that they are not following him completely. I think in meetings with him, they have offered advice early on about an Iran attack. When Netanyahu was pushing that. So I think early on they offered some different points of view. But of course, the president decided to move ahead, and those two saluted, and they're marching forward. But I would imagine when they get home at night, they have a beer, and then they're going, my God, this guy can be so erratic. I mean, I don't think they march around their living room, saluting the president. I think when they get home, they are just what you said. They don't know where this is going. They probably feel frustrated, feel helpless. What can we advise the president? I think I think those two recognize that we're in a pickle. As are the Iranians. I don't think we ought to leave the Iranians out of this at all. Life isn't so great for them either. And that to me is an impetus for both sides to sit down at the table and try to sort something out that works here. Because
Let me just ask you about one other matter. We've had number 10, Downing Street, the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, of course. He is announcing a major £8.4 billion investment in the next stage of the UK's dreadnought nuclear deterrent submarine build programme. He's visiting that programme in Barrow-in-Furness. He's talking about how this is going to support a lot of jobs in the area. But clearly, the US have been pushing Britain and other allies to spend more on defence. We haven't got those overall figures yet, but do you think that perhaps this is a move that President Trump might welcome?
Well, I think he certainly welcomes it, but I think overall, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, it's something that we like to see, particularly UK doing. The UK military capability in terms of certainly its submarines is very important to the U.S. We've worked closely with the U.K. for years and years and years on this. I think it's a great sign that the new prime minister takes the military aspect very seriously, because there has been questions in Washington. We don't know him very well. We know his background isn't necessarily defense, and his minister of defense, of course, doesn't have a military background either, and so we've been a bit worried about where things might go. And this putting forward money for the submarine program, I think there's a sigh of relief. It's a great sign that the UK is doing everything it can to keep militarily strong. And just to put a plug in for the conventional forces, the Army, the Air Force, the other aspects of the Navy, they're going to have needs too. And I know the submarine money takes up a lot of that budget. But I do hope the new PM can find a way to keep alive the other services as well, as they're beginning to get stronger.
Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO. Great to talk to you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.